He's a rat. You know it, and I know it.
He's talking crazy.
I gave you all I had. I did.
Let's go. We can make it. Come on, Dutch. Come on!
With the death of Arthur, Dutch and Micah parted ways. With the high honor version, Dutch finally sees Micah for the traitor he is and leaves, speechless and defeated. Despite this, they meet up once again 8 years later at Mount Hagen, and they appeared to be getting back together.
Dutch and I are teaming up once more. We got money, we got dreams.
A meeting that would end with Dutch avenging his most loyal friend, and then disappearing once more. But something about this whole meeting just don't sit right, even before John gets there. Them teaming up again, chasing money and dreams once more, after all that transpired, after Dutch loses trust in Micah and leaves a broken man? No. It just don't make any sense. When Dutch is done, he doesn't even seem to take any of the money, despite that supposedly being the reason he and Micah were there. He just leaves in silence, as if he's done what he came to do. We don't know much about this meeting between Dutch and Micah. We don't know how it was arranged. We don't know which of the two proposed it. We don't know how long they'd been there, or what, if anything, they'd said to each other before John arrived. But what we do know is this. A known informant meets with a highly wanted criminal at a remote location for presumably the first time in years. And pretty soon afterwards, the feds arrive. And not just any Fed. Edgar Ross, who we know is actively looking for Dutch, and who has worked with Micah in the past. Anyone else smell a rat? So, this is my theory. Micah was still an informant. He was meeting with Dutch, not to team back up with him as he claims, but to turn him in to Agent Ross. Maybe under some, no doubt false, promise of freedom, or a share of that Blackwater money. Come on, don't tell me you believe that
We got dreams.
shit for a single second. Once a rat, always a rat.
It all makes sense now.
No, it damn well doesn't.
Don't worry, I know I've got some explaining to do. So let's saddle up and take a closer look. We know Micah has a long history as a rat, and there's a lot of money involved here. It's not exactly hard to imagine he'd have motivation to set Dutch up. Maybe the feds had the Blackwater money. Maybe they offered Micah and his gang a share in return for their cooperation bringing in Dutch, and gave him some to use as bait to lure Dutch in. Maybe Micah found the money himself, but the feds caught wind and made a deal with him that he could keep at least some of the money, so long as he somehow handed over Dutch. A deal I'm absolutely sure the feds would never have betrayed, of course. Exactly how this meeting was planned, and by whom, is a mystery. But being some kind of setup makes a lot more sense than either Dutch or Micah wanting to buddy back up. And I think what we do see in-game lines up with this theory. Some think Micah and Dutch have been back together for a while at this point. But Micah says Dutch is making a social call.
All manner of folk paying social calls.
And talks about teaming up as something they're planning to do. not something they've done. So this is more likely their first meeting in a while, which makes Ross showing up soon afterward all the more suspicious. As for Dutch, he never went there to team up. He knows now that Micah isn't to be trusted.
He's a rat. You know it, and I know it.
He went to that meeting to kill him. He even tells us as much.
What are you doing here, Dutch? Same as you, I suppose.
I think one reason for doing this, besides avenging Arthur, of course, he knew the truth about this meeting. It was a damn setup. Ross and Fordham turned up expecting their long-serving informant, Micah, to hand over Dutch on a silver platter. Instead, they find their prize rat dead. Why else would they be there? Did they catch wind that Micah and his gang were up in the mountains and head up to get them? Then where's their armed backup? Why would they come alone? And if the scene where they arrive is much afterward and they're just investigating what somebody else found, it's a heck of a coincidence for it to be Ross and Fordham. It's possible, of course, but coincidence? With a rat like Micah involved? Not likely. Look at Ross's reaction when he realizes the body is Micah. He doesn't seem surprised at all, and he doesn't need to take much of a look. And then throws the body down, annoyed, throwing his arms and shaking his head. And look at Fordham. He checks the cabin, then comes out and throws his arms up in confusion, as if something he was expecting to be in there isn't. This isn't two men investigating a crime scene. These are the reactions of people whose plans have went wrong. They probably assume Dutch caught wind of the trap, killed Micah, and left. But when they start investigating, the trail of witnesses instead leads them to John Marston. Speaking of John, let's bring him into the picture. Whatever is currently happening with Dutch and Micah, we don't know. But John interrupts the meeting, either during it or before it happens. Now this wasn't part of Micah's plan, of course. John's just getting in the way, and he's clearly determined for a shootout. So, Micah goads him, and makes sure he shoots first. Notice that Dutch is staying in the cabin out of the way. Whatever his reasons are for this, he does come out. And with Sadie as Micah's hostage, the situation becomes a standoff. And just listen to how Micah's manner changes.
We got money. We got dreams. Join us, John. Join us. Join us. Join us, John. I don't want to kill you, John.
All of a sudden, Micah's trying to tempt John with this prosperous new dream. Why would he say this? A minute ago, they were shooting each other. He knows John's out for blood. But if you ask me, what Micah also knows is that backup is on the way. And this
Join us, John.
crap, it's simply a play for a time. Now that the situation has changed and the shooting stopped, he's just trying to lower John's guard and seeing if he can't turn him in too. Why else would he talk like this? He can't believe for a moment that John would ever be tempted by this offer. He's got to be stalling. Notice Dutch, too. He'd usually be full of speeches and big promises during these talks of money and dreams. But he just stays silent. It's all Micah with the big promises. It's all Micah who's trying to talk the situation down. When Dutch does talk, it's to tell John how he feels. He doesn't mention any plans.
Dutch, come on now. You shot at me, son. I was trying to do my best. You just cared for yourself.
And of course, we know how he chooses to end the standoff.
I ain't got too much to say no more.
So, let's step back and take a look at my theory as a whole picture. Dutch and Micah truly planning to get back together again does not add up. Dutch seems done with it all, and he no longer trusts Micah. Micah already has a long history as a rat and a manipulator, so it's not exactly out of character. So someone orchestrated that meeting. Maybe it was Micah ratting out yet again. Maybe it was the feds looking to catch Dutch, or maybe it was even Dutch looking to kill Micah and suspecting a setup. We'll never truly know. Either way, everyone's plan goes to shit when John shows up full of revenge. When the initial shooting calms down, Micah appears to be playing for time and trying to lure John in on this supposed scheme too. Maybe seeing if he can't turn he and Sadie in for a bigger payday. Dutch remains uncharacteristically silent during the standoff, and he does not corroborate any plans. It's all Micah doing the negotiating. Dutch doesn't aid his supposed partner in any way. He knows it's all bullshit. Instead, of course, he kills Micah. Probably to avenge Arthur, but maybe also because he figured the meeting was a setup. And most crucially, we see Agents Ross and Fordham show up alone to the scene afterward. And their body language is a dead giveaway that they did not find what they expected. Ross is clearly annoyed to find Micah dead, and Fordham is disappointed to come out of the cabin empty-handed. Again, some details remain a mystery, and probably always will. But the agent's negative reaction to finding the scene during the credits is clear if you pay attention. Then the more subtle touches, like Micah's playing friendly with John and trying to lower his guard, the ever-elusive Blackwater money being there, and Dutch the speech lover staying silent and not having a thing to say about teaming back up and chasing more dreams. I firmly believe this was one last attempt from Micah to worm his way to a handsome payday, and it backfired. But what does this mean? Well, besides adding a whole other layer to this iconic final mission, it also adds another level of tragedy to the legend of John Marston. He stormed that mountain, guns blazing, totally unaware that higher powers were at play, and still using Micah for their own gain. And of course, that Dutch was already there to kill him anyway. The feds may even have planned to use their old tool Micah to hunt down the other known gang members. But instead, John came along and introduced himself to them. And in wiping out Micah's gang, he showed that he'd be the perfect weapon for them when the time came. And he wouldn't need bribery or trickery or self-interest to cooperate. His family would make perfect leverage. The end result, of course, is the events of the first game. If only he'd listened to Arthur.
Just do one thing or another. Not be two people at once, that's all I'm saying.
You gotta run and don't look back. Don't look back. Don't look back.
If only.